Message translation can be helpful in some ways. It maybe isn't everyone's favorite. It's definitely not my favorite all the time. So it can be helpful in some ways and maybe not so helpful in others. But in the introduction of this story of the woman at the well, this translation and the choices that were made are, I think, helpful for setting the stage. A woman, a Samaritan. And through her and Jesus' conversation, we learn she's had lots of romantic relationships. And if you've heard this story before, you've probably been given background on how women were treated back in this time. And really, the fact is that while we've made strides, great strides for women's rights, we have a long way to go before we see real equity for women. For example, have you heard of the pink tax? This is the idea that women's products are priced abnormally higher than men's, things such as deodorant and underwear. This past year, women earned 81 cents on the dollar compared to their male counterparts. Most over-the-counter prescription drugs have a long history of only being tested on male subjects, with little or no information on how these things may affect women differently. Many women I know have had real trouble having doctors believe them when they report different things, such as pain levels. In fact, there was a really interesting and horrifying podcast. Didn't mean to laugh, it is truly horrifying. It's kind of my way to lighten my own sense of this horror. This podcast came out a few years ago that Catherine introduced me to called The Retrievals. And if you're interested, it's only about 5 episodes long. And it kind of surrounds this story of scores of women who went to a health clinic at Yale for fertility treatment. And many of these women were expressing that they were experiencing immense pain during their egg retrieval procedure. The doctors didn't believe them and told them they were receiving plenty of painkiller, which was fentanyl. Well, it turns out, spoiler alert, that a nurse was stealing the fentanyl and replacing it with saline solution. So it's pretty clear from these examples we still have a lot of work to do for the fair half of our population. But back to our text. This particular woman in this tale had it especially rough. Clearly, her life experiences would lead one to understand her as a person who was pushed to the edges of society, to be marginalized. Clearly, her life experiences have isolated her and perhaps have forced her into circumstances where she has had to fight for what she needs. I wonder if this is the case here. I wonder if she had to practice tenacity and boldness in order to get the things she needed in order to survive. I wonder if the perseverance she exhibits in her conversation here with Jesus is sort of her mode of operating, as she has had to work hard to be heard any time and place when she was in that time and place for anyone that she spoke to. I wonder if her refusal to take Jesus at his word is due to the fact that perhaps the 5 other men she was married to were liars and cheats, who promised her the world only to let her down through their actions, or perhaps they died and that's the reason they didn't follow through on their promises. I wonder if she's reticent to marry this man that she's with now, as she's already had 5 marriages that didn't work out. I wonder what else she might be going through or has experienced as a person who has a lot working against her. I think we have a lot to learn from the character of this otherwise unnamed woman. She doesn't take things at face value. She probes and asks good questions. She isn't afraid to speak up and talk back. Isn't just fighting for the sake of fighting. She's trying to get to the bottom of things, and she's looking for answers in a way that is true to herself and her lived experiences. One of my favorite parts of visiting this story this time around is imagining that she's actually pretty sarcastically engaging with Jesus. When Jesus asks her for a drink, I wonder if her response is sort of mocking his request. Who are you, a Jew, to ask me, a Samaritan, for a drink? Clearly you understand the culture war we're in right now, or are you that daft? When told that Jesus can give her this living water, I wonder if she responds the way she does because she's like, oh yeah, right, you're a crazy person. Give me this wonderful water that I may drink and never be thirsty again. But really is thinking to herself, maybe, let's see how he responds to this one. Maybe I can catch him. But Jesus is quick on his feet too, and drives the conversation in another direction, requesting that she go and get her husband. This seems to sort of take her off guard, as her response is the shortest in the passage. I have no husband. Jesus then goes on to prove that he knows more about her than she may think. And this sort of shakes her out of her defensive, skeptical mode, and she seems to take a curious turn. I think now she begins to wonder about Jesus. I appreciate so much about this woman in the story. She's taken zero crap from anyone, especially not this random Jewish dude. But through her encounter with him, she opens her mind. She sees he is more than he first appears and changes her posture toward him, even though culturally, Jews and Samaritans were separate from one another. The sort of separation between Jews and Samaritans is a product of, you could probably guess what I'm going to say, it's a product of empire. Such division is critical for empire to sustain itself, lest the proletariat band together and rise up. They, the empire, those in power, they want us, just like the Jews and Samaritans, to focus on our differences instead of our similarities. In reality, Jews and Samaritans, they believed a lot of the same foundational theological points. Sure, there were things that made them different, but largely they were separated due to differences in belief about which location was the holiest or contained the presence of God, which is an idea that the prophets throughout the Hebrew Bible have been trying to tear down for centuries. They were trying to explain that God is present everywhere. When we look around our country, it's clear that as a people we do a great job of drawing dividing lines between ourselves over our differences. So it's the Seahawks and the Patriots in the Super Bowl next week, right?
Careful.
What if I told you I was a Patriots fan? How would you respond? I'm not a Patriots fan, though I used to be. You might boo me, and that might be justified. I would be okay with it. I could take it. But this whole division thing, we're especially good, yes, in some of these things that maybe don't matter so much, but we're really good at it in politics. We draw dividing lines between us and them, and even the us on this progressive side of the spectrum that many of us fall on. We're really practiced at running political purity tests to make sure that others around us are the right kind of progressive. And when we focus on these differences, we're really just isolating ourselves. And sometimes we focus on these differences for good reasons, like to protect marginalized people by barring certain unrepentant folks from being a part of this community. Yes, all are welcome, sure, unless they're active bigots who are trying to hurt those that we care for most. And in this moment in time, I wonder if it's time for us to just broaden our scope a bit, and just bear with me here. I just saw this past week a very popular conservative podcaster. He's got the 4th most popular podcast in the world. I don't really like to say his name, but it rhymes with Roe Jogan. He actually came out saying this past week that ICE is doing too much. The NRA, for God's sake, came out and said that the way that the federal government has been handling the state-sanctioned murder of Alex Preddy is a threat to Second Amendment rights. Do I agree with the vast majority of what this podcaster or the NRA stand for? As a Christian and a pacifist, and I'll confess, as an anarchist, absolutely not. However, it's important for us to welcome such voices into the fight for justice for our vulnerable neighbors. I was at a sign waving gathering a couple weeks ago with Cassian and our dog Robin Hood at a park, and many of those signs that were being waved, I would absolutely not have made myself or been proud to hold or be associated with. But that's not where we are right now. For clarity's sake, I'm not suggesting we become best friends with people that we disagree with politically or theologically. Heck, I'm not even suggesting that we dialogue at this point in time about different sorts of political issues and get into arguments about political philosophy or theology. As a friend of mine said recently, that's peacetime talk. Now it's wartime. And when it's wartime, we may have to lower our common denominator a good bit so that we can organize en masse. And when our neighbors are being disappeared and even executed in the street by the American empire, it's time to set the culture wars down and recognize that there is something greater at stake. It's time to set aside our progressive purity and band together with our neighbors to fight for what's right. Maybe that looks like engaging in conversations with our neighbors about what's going on, even if it means letting slide their perverse view of certain things. Maybe it means giving folks a bit of grace for just now starting to care about ICE overreach, only after a couple white people were killed instead of caring about everyone else that's been hurt. Maybe it looks like inviting someone to head down to a march or rally, or to call their folks who are representing us in Congress. Back to our text, near the end of the story, we see Jesus and his disciples, all Jewish, mind you, hang out for 2 days with the Samaritans. They put down their differences for the greater common good, for Jesus and his ministry and his message. I wonder what would happen to us if we sat down with people we believed differently with, than we maybe believe that we disagree with, for 2 whole days. As long as we survived it, I wonder if we would find that we actually hold quite a bit in common. Perhaps in following Jesus in this as he tears down divisive walls and brings communities together, we can be reminded today that the things of Jesus, giving water to the thirsty, food to the hungry, clothing to the naked, shelter, protection, and security for those who have none, and standing in solidarity with the sick and imprisoned. I wonder if this is what is important for us to focus on, not just now, but always. As we are reaching a point where most people are feeling the negative pressure of empire in our nation, maybe more so than ever before, all across the political spectrum, perhaps now is the time to welcome these folks into the fight to realize the kingdom of God. Perhaps now is the time to just set our differences aside for a little while. Not get rid of them, just maybe not have them at the forefront. Put our desire for political purity away for a time and band together for the least of these in our communities. For as the old adage goes, the best time to plant a tree was 30 years ago. Second best time? It's right now. May we hearken to God's call to love our neighbor and to invite those we disagree with to do the same. Amen.
Amen.
You may remain seated.